Alright, now in this lecture we will talk about functions with outputs. So we have already seen a couple of things that we can do with functions. The first thing I showed you was to create a very simple standard function using def keyword, then name, then empty parentheses, then colon over here. Then within the body of function you can do a bunch of things which will be carried out every time when you trigger or call the function like this over here. And this type of function basically just help you to reduce the amount of code you have to write when you have instruction that you want to execute it repeatedly. Now the next type of function that we saw actually had something inside these parentheses over here. And this something is an input which can be passed over when we call the function. Now in this case, when we call this function, we are passing triple one over here, which is argument, which gets passed into this parameter called something, and then it gets used within the body of function. The second type of function is the function which allow for inputs, and this gives us ability to modify the code in the function and get it to do something different each time depending on the input that was passed in. Now we are going to continue to the final type of function which allow us to have output once the function is completed. Now here we are going to start with this simple function. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write def keyword, then the function name, then inside parentheses. For now I'm not going to put anything. So it's possible that when you are creating functions with the output, you can put inputs also, but for simplicity we are not going to put input over here because inputs and outputs are completely separate from each other. So this is a normal function and you have seen it many times. And within the body of function, I'm just going to do some specific calculations. So I have created a variable which is result, and I have assigned the 1 plus 2 to this variable over here. So I'm calculating 1 plus 2 over here. Now then I can use output keyword, which is return keyword. Then after return keyword, I can put this result that I've calculated over here. In this case, the output is the result. And what that means is when I call this function later on, and it runs, then it will go ahead and output this result, and it will replace this function over here. Now this is result held in the code where the function was called. Now actually I can save it to another variable as a result of this function over here. So if I create a variable over here called output, and I can assign this result that I am getting from this my first function to this variable over here. So in this case, the result is 3, so this means that 3 will be assigned to this output over here. Now in this case, this code might look like this. So without using any variable over here, we can just return this calculation. Then in this case, when we are calling our function, we can call it like this. So we are creating output variable over here, then assigning it this function. So this function will return this 3 from here, and it will assign to this output variable over here. Now the way that I think about the function with outputs is almost kinda like a machine. So in this case, this machine has an input with empty bottle. So if you put empty bottle to this milk machine over here, it's going to process something over here, then it's going to output a bottle with full of milk. So in this case, the function has input, which is empty glass bottle, and it has an output, the glass bottle filled with milk. And in the middle, there is some process or some code that is being executed to create this change over here. Now this ties together all things that we have learned about functions. So basically it has input with empty bottle, so it's doing some processing over here, and it's giving output as a bottle with full of milk. So to put everything together, let's see how this is working in practice. Now basically till now, when we are using built-in functions, we have used the functions with outputs. We have used the functions like math function or some other built-in functions such as len function. These functions basically are the functions with output. So for example, if I import math model over here and use one of the function of math model, in this case you will see that it's going to return something. So for example, I'm going to use the square root function. So I'm just going to put math dot square root. So in this case, it requires one parameter. So as you can see, I need to put any number over here. For example, for simplicity, I'm going to put 16. Now, if I run our code, you'll see that in this case nothing happens in the console because it's returning value, but we are not printing that value to the console. Now to see the value that we are getting from this function, we can use just this function inside print statement. So if I use this inside print statement, we know that print statement prints whatever it has inside this function to the console. So if I run it one more time, in this case you will see that it's printing out 4 because this function returns 4, so it's printing out 4 to the console. So we can even save this function's output. For example, I'm going to create variable like this, and then after saving this output to the output variable, we can print out to the console. You will see that same thing happens over here. So as you can see, it's printing out 4.0. So this means that this function, square root function, is a function with output. Now the functions that do not have any output are called void functions. So if any function is not returning anything, in this case we are calling these functions void functions. So for simplicity, for example, let's just create a function, simple function over here. Def, for example, I'm going to put print twice. So it's not going to take any parameter. I'm just going to print out hello to the console twice. So if I run this function, which means that if I call this function over here, you'll see that it's going to print out hello twice to the console. So it's printing out straight away. But if I just create a variable over here, for example, output variable, and assign this value to this output and try to print out the output to the console, you will see that in this case it's going to return the type of none, because here the function does not return anything. So that's why it's just printing out to the console this hello is coming from this print statement and it's not returning anything. That's why what Python does over here is it checks that if we don't have any return statement over here, it's printing out none over here. Now the question is, how can we create function with the output in practice? So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to create a function which called format name, and this function will take two parameters, first name and last name, and it's going to change this input so to the title case. So in this case, if I put as input, for example, Elshad, the output will be like Elshad. So here there's another challenge. So I want you to pause the video and create a function which takes two parameters. Then we will continue from there. Now hopefully you have done it by yourself. So if you haven't done it, let's do it together. So the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to use def keywords. Then we are going to put the name of function. So as I mentioned before, it's going to be format name. So it's going to take two parameters. So the first parameter will be first name. So I'm just going to put fname, and the second parameter will be last name. Then we are going to format these names to print out title case. Now here, you might not know how to find out the title case. Now, as always, what we are going to do, we are going to search to see how can we find the built-in function to convert these names to the title case. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open Google, I'm going to search Python title case function. Now here, if you go to on Stack Overflow, you will see that someone asked question how to convert string to the title case in Python. You will see that whatever we are putting as an input is going to print out as a title case like this. So the answer is you are writing the string like this, then put dot and using title function like this. So in this case, in our case, we are going to put first name dot title case. So what I'm going to do over here is, so I'm just going to print out the result that we are getting from the title function. So the first is I'm going to put fname dot. So in this case, we can call title function. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the second parameter that we are getting from function. So it's going to be L. Now in this case, if I run our code, so I'm just going to call this function. So I'm going to put my first name with the small letters, and I'm going to put my surname with lowercase letters also. So at the end, let me just put with capital letter. Now if I run this, so here we have put L last, it has to be L name, last name. So if I run this, you will see that it's converted it to Elshad and Karimov with the title case. Now here, instead of just returning these two names over here, we can actually combine them together and return them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this formatted name to a new variable. So in this case, I'm going to put variable over here, formatted name, formatted first name. So this means that this title function will return the formatted name. So I'm going to save it to this formatted name variable. So I'm going to do the same operation for this formatted last name. So instead of F, I'm going to put over here L. So I need to delete the print statement. Then I need to put like this. Now after doing so, we can just print out these two variables to the console. So here I'm going to use f string. So it's going to be like this. Then inside f string we are going to put braces. Then inside braces we are going to put first formatted first name, then comma, then formatted last name. Now if I run our code one more time, you'll see that in this case it's combined these two variables together and print out to the console. So basically, instead of print statement over here, we can use return keyword to return this expression from this function. So I'm going to delete print statement from here. So instead of print, I'm going to put output keyword, which is return, and it's going to be like this. So if I run our function in this case, you'll see that nothing happens into the console. So this means that we have get the value from this format name function, but we have not saved it anywhere and we have not printed out to this one to the console. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new variable over here, which is output. Then at the end, we are going to print out output to the console. So if I run our code one more time, so in this case, you see that the same output printed out to the console. So basically, with this, we have created a function in which we have inputs, two inputs, and then we are doing some processing on these inputs. Then we are returning output with a title case and combining them together. Now we can visualize this by copying this code from here and passing into Tony to see how the execution occurs in this case. So inside Tony, I'm just going to pass the code over here. Then I'm going to click debug current script. Now when we click the debug current script, so we know that when we are calling the script in Python, first it's going to check the first line. So in the first line we have comments, that's why it's going to skip to the third line. Now in the third line, it's going to check the body of the function. We know that function will not be executed if we are not calling this function, so that's why in this case nothing will happen over here. Then if I click step into it, it's going to continue to the next line. So in the next line we are calling this function and saving it to the output. So what's going to do, if I click step into one more time, it's going to check this function, then it's going to check one by one the parameters. So in this case, as a parameter we are sending Elshad, then the second parameter is Karimov, then it's going to run this function over here. So this means that it's going to continue to the code of this function. Now in the first line of code of this function, we are formatting the name as a title. So this means that it's going to take the name. So as a parameter, we have passed Elshad. Then it's going to convert it to the title case. So as you can see, it converted to title case. In this case, it's like this, and it saved it to formatted F name. Then it's going to continue to the next line. So in the next line, it's going to take the second parameter. So the second parameter is Karimov like this. Then it's going to call title function and convert it to the title case, and it's going to save it to this formatted L name. Then if I click one more time, it's going to continue to the third line of this function. So in the third line, we have return statement and the formatted expression like this. So this means that it's going to format the names like this. So as you can see, the name is Elshad with comma Karimov with title case. So it's going to return this one. So this means that if I return this, it's going to continue our code and save it to output variable over here. Now after saving it to output variable, it's going to continue to the print statement, and then in the print statement, it's going to print out this value to the console. So as you can see, Elshad Karimov printed out to the console. Now with this, we have seen how function with output works. Now here, the important moment is this return keyword over here. Now whatever we put after return keyword over here is not going to be executed inside this function. So for example, if I put print statement after this return keyword, so I'm just going to print out test and rerun our code, you'll see that it's just printing out Elshad Karimov to the console. So this print statement over here is skipped, because when we are calling this function, all codes continue till over here, then it will just skip the codes that comes after the keyword. So the return keyword is really the most important thing in order to create a function that has output, because everything that comes after it is going to be replaced where the function is called. Now with this, we have come to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, we have discussed how functions with output works. So hopefully everything is clear about them. So see you in the next lecture.